Chief Executive Carrie Lam says she will not seek a second term. About 3,100 new COVID-19 cases in the city. And HKDSE will go ahead as scheduled, and there'll be a special exam center for COVID-positive candidates or close contacts of patients.
Good evening and welcome. Chief Executive Carrie Lam has announced she will not run for a second term. She says she notified Beijing of her decision early last year.
Lam cited family reasons for not seeking re-election. Caleb Leung has the top story.
I am taking this earliest opportunity to inform the public through the media that I will not contest in the coming chief executive election.
In a surprise announcement at the start of her daily anti-epidemic press briefing, Chief Executive Carrie Lam said she will not be seeking a second term. She will complete her 5-year term of Chief Executive on June 30th, and this also spells the conclusion of her 42 years of public service. Lam stressed she had already notified the central government of her decision back in early 2021. She cited family reasons for her decision, saying her family think it is time for her to go back home, and that is her only consideration.
This is not a question of evaluating my performance or the performance of the Hong Kong SAR government in this term. This is a question of my personal wish and aspiration. And my personal wish and aspiration is entirely based on my family consideration. This is what I have told the Central People's Government, and they have expressed understanding.
Lam said Hong Kong faced unprecedented pressure during her time in office, including the social unrest related to the extradition bill, interference in the city's affairs by foreign forces, and the COVID pandemic. She said backing by the central government is the most critical force supporting her and the SAR. Regarding her remaining time in office, Lam said there are still a few tasks she's committed to, such as overseeing the upcoming CE election, controlling the 5th wave of COVID, preparing for the celebration of the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to the motherland, as well as handing over the reins to the next administration. Lam said her successor will decide whether to proceed with her government restructuring proposal. Chief Secretary for Administration John Lee has been rumored to be planning to run in the upcoming chief executive election. Lam said so far no senior government official has resigned.
And it's not convenient for me to confirm or comment on prospective candidates or people who are going to receive appointment from the central authorities.
But Lam did share her thoughts on what attributes her successor should possess.
He has to be accountable to Hong Kong and at the same time to the PRC government. He or she should be guarding the special characteristics of Hong Kong, i.e. Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong, high degree of autonomy.
Lam believes whoever decides to run will have the desire to serve Hong Kong. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Well, with Carrie Lam dropping out of the chief executive election, veteran political analyst Lau Siu-kai said there may be just one candidate in the race.
On Lam's performance as CE, some politicians said the government had been ill-prepared for the 5th wave of the epidemic. Timothy Lee has more.
Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced her decision not to seek re-election at a time when Hong Kong is still under the 5th wave of the COVID epidemic. Some political figures gave a muted response to Lam's announcement, even though they understand that Lam is operating under difficult circumstances. Starry Lee, chairwoman of the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong, said it will be up to history to judge Lam's performance. Lee said Carrie Lam faced a challenging environment as Hong Kong was affected by an unstable international situation and conflicts between major countries. But Lee blamed Lam for mishandling the city's 5th wave of COVID-19, adding that the government was ill-prepared for it. Professor Lau Siu-kai from the Chinese Association of Hong Kong and Macau Studies said Lam made a smart move by not seeking a second term. He noted that both the social unrest related to the anti-extradition bill movement and the COVID epidemic have dealt a heavy blow to Lam's credibility and ability to govern. Lau added that Lam may have already realized she has lost the ability to tackle even tougher tasks ahead. Lau thinks there might be only one person running in the CE race in the end. Lawmaker Alice Mack, a member of the election committee, said the biggest difference between this CE election and previous ones is that this one is being held amid an epidemic. She added that under the new electoral system, a new CE suitable for Hong Kong will be elected. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Well, decades of public service culminated in Carrie Lam's role as Hong Kong's first female chief executive 5 years ago.
Lam was once a highly popular government official, but her years as the city's leader was a turbulent time marked by mass protests and COVID-19 infections that overwhelmed Hong Kong's healthcare system. During her 4 decades of service in the government, Carrie Lam was no stranger to protests and controversy. In 2007, the then Secretary for Development pushed ahead with the demolition of Queen's Pier, despite opposition from some sectors.
The administration and its departments will not initiate violent measures. And then unless we are faced with people who have become violent.
She was later promoted to Chief Secretary for Administration. 5 years later, Carrie Lam ran in the chief executive election.
I hereby declare Mrs. Lam is returned at the election. Congratulations, Mrs. Lam.
Reaching the pinnacle of her career, she secured the city's top job with 777 votes in 2017.
My priority will be to heal the divide and to ease the frustrations, and to unite our society to move forward. Deeds speak louder than words.
During her term, Lam made bold changes to education, housing, labour and welfare policies, but some of them were divisive, such as her proposal to build an artificial island off Lantau. Near the beginning of her term, Lam tried to break the ice with the pan-democratic camp. But the attempt later proved futile. Perhaps Lam's biggest controversy was related to proposed amendments to the extradition law, which resulted in widespread protests, violence and calls for her to step down.
I can only say that I'm very sad to be given this label that I'm betraying Hong Kong. I will not do anything that is not in the interest of Hong Kong.
Clashes between police and protesters continued, even after she withdrew the bill.
The bill is dead.
The National People's Congress Standing Committee passed the Hong Kong National Security Law, a move Carrie Lam said would lead the city out of a deadlock. In 2020, the city was plagued by the first wave of COVID infections, when members of the public scrambled for face masks. The CE refused to close the borders at first, prompting some healthcare workers to go on strike. Lam's administration has been criticized for its anti-pandemic measures as she stood by her views.
I will have to say it very clearly that we have no plans for any widespread city lockdown as you have seen in some of the other places.
In the latest wave of the pandemic, Carrie Lam insisted on not wearing a mask at first when meeting the press.
The people of Hong Kong may even have to feel my emotions.
Lam has repeatedly refused to comment on her intention about running for a second term until she announced her decision today. The Diploma of Secondary Education examination will be held as scheduled around 3 weeks from now.
A special examination center will be set up in Penny's Bay for candidates who test COVID positive and for close contacts of COVID patients. Jackie Lin reports.
As the pandemic continues to ease, a green light for the 2022 DSE examination to be held between April 22nd and May 14th as planned. 60% of the candidates are expected to complete the High 6 exam within the first 2 weeks. Exam results will be released on July 20th. A special arrangement too for exam takers who tested COVID positive or are undergoing quarantine. They could choose to sit the exam at the Penny's Bay Community Isolation Facility. That's if their health condition allows, meaning
As to uncomfortable, they feel, well, the confirmed cases know best. So the candidates must think this through carefully. If they take the exam while they are feeling very tired, then that may not be the best scenario.
The arrangement will go like this. Candidates should get COVID screened via rapid tests at around 6:30 a.m. before the exam begins at 8:30 a.m. If the results returned positive, they should inform the examination authority by calling its hotline as soon as possible. They will then be sent to the special exam center in Penny's Bay through designated taxis. There, the candidates will have to be quarantined for at least 7 days. During the period, they can decide if they want to sit the exam on a day-to-day basis based on their health conditions. For COVID-infected candidates who choose not to take the exam, their DSE results would be calculated based on their school performances. Lawmaker Tang Fei of the Federation of Education Workers says preparation is key both psychologically and materially for any worst-case scenario. For instance, candidates should have a quarantine pack with their study items and personal essentials at the ready, a similar idea as hospital bags for pregnant women, Tang says. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Hong Kong reported 3,138 new COVID-19 cases today, with the daily infection number staying around 3,000 for the second consecutive day. Among the new cases, 12 were imported. 77 patients died in public hospitals yesterday. 5 of the younger fatalities had chronic ill disease. Another elderly care home reported COVID infections. Since the beginning of the fifth wave, coronavirus has claimed the lives of 8,049 people in the city, with more than 97% of elderly care homes having reported outbreaks.
The mainland reported more than 13,000 new COVID cases, with 9,000 of them in Shanghai. Residents of Shanghai will undergo mandatory testing today. Several cities in Jiangxi and Jiangsu provinces have sent a 10,000-member medical team to help out in Shanghai. Military aircraft also arrived in Shanghai, transporting personnel from the army to provide pandemic relief support. Vice Premier Sun Chunlan, who's in Shanghai, said the city's core functions must carry on, even under pandemic control measures. Still ahead on tonight's news, Ukraine accuses Russia of war crimes, while Moscow calls reports of deliberate killings of civilians Ukrainian provocation. Hungary's nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban wins a 4th term. And a German man suspected of having 90 COVID jabs in order to sell vaccination records.
Welcome back to TVB News. Hungary's nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban scored a 4th consecutive convincing win in Sunday's parliamentary election.
Voters endorsed his conservative, illiberal state and shrugged off concerns about Budapest's close ties with Russia. Alan Booknew reports.
Based on preliminary results, the National Election Office said Orban's Fidesz party will have 135 seats in Parliament, a 2/3 majority, with the opposition alliance gaining 56 seats. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a major topic in the election, appeared to upend Orban's campaign, forcing him into awkward maneuvering over his cozy relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He has banned transport of arms to Ukraine through Hungary, but he has condemned the Russian invasion and has not gone against any European sanctions of Moscow. In his 10-minute victory speech, Orban said, "We won a victory so big you can see it from the moon, and you can see it from Brussels." The European Union, based in Brussels, has often condemned Orban for alleged corruption and overseeing democratic backsliding. His comfortable victory could embolden the 58-year-old Orban in his policy agenda, which critics say amount to a subversion of democratic norms, media freedom, and the rights of minorities, particularly gays and lesbians. The critics say he sought to cement one-party rule by taking control of media outlets and rejigging election rules. Conceding defeat, opposition leader Peter Markizai said Fidesz's win was due to what he called its vast propaganda machine, including media dominance. The contest had expected to be closer, since Hungary's 6 main opposition parties put aside ideological differences to form a united front against Orbán. Though the parties are conservative, Orbán referred to them as leftists who would mend ties with the European Union and lead the country into war. Alan Brookniet, TVB News.
A 60-year-old German man allegedly had himself vaccinated against COVID-19 up to 90 times in order to sell the vaccination records. The man from the eastern German city of Magdeburg would sell forged vaccination cards with real vaccine batch numbers to people who didn't want to get the shots but wanted the vaccine pass. He was caught at the vaccination center when he showed up for a COVID shot for a second day in a row. Police confiscated several blank vaccination cards and started criminal proceedings. It's not immediately clear what impact the approximately 90 shots of vaccine from different brands have had on the man's health.
Sacramento police in the U.S. state of California are hunting for at least 2 suspects after a mass shooting that left 6 people dead and 12 others injured. 3 men and 3 women were killed in the gunfire just a few blocks from the state capitol early Sunday as bars began to close and people poured onto the streets. Few details have been released about the investigation, but police say a large fight broke out before the killings. At least 1 gun has been recovered from the scene. The incident comes a little more than a month after a man shot and killed his 3 children and a 4th person before taking his own life in the same city. U.S. President Joe Biden said the country is once again mourning a community hurt by gun violence. He called on Congress to pass stricter gun legislation.
Several Sri Lankan cabinet ministers and the central bank governor have resigned days after a state of emergency was declared over an economic crisis. The debt-laden country is struggling to pay for imports of fuel and other essentials due to a shortage of foreign currency. This has led to power cuts, protests on the streets, and a curfew. The president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, is under pressure to step down. Protests outside his residence saw several police and army vehicles set on fire. The Rajapaksa family has concentrated political power around itself. Now, coalition parties are demanding that a caretaker cabinet be appointed to lead the island nation out of the crisis.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Bye for now.